The groan of twisted metal was the first sound, followed by the scent of ozone and something deeply terrestrial, like damp moss after a storm. Kalen's head throbbed in time with the flickering emergency light. Outside the fractured viewport, colossal trees with bark like spun obsidian reached for a sky the color of a faded bruise. Purple ferns unfurled in the low light, their fronds tipped with a faint, pulsing bioluminescence. His ship, the Asterisk Wanderer, was a tomb half buried in alien soil. He was alone. He stumbled from the wreckage, the air thick and sweet. The forest floor was a soft carpet of rust-colored lichen that muffled his every step. Gravity felt heavier here, a constant pressure on his shoulders. The wreck smoked behind him, a scar of silver and black against the umber and violet landscape. He clutched the rescue beacon, its cool metal a fragile promise against his palm. A sound, like the chime of distant, hollow glass, echoed through the trees, and he froze, suddenly aware of how loud his own breathing was. It was movement, a flicker at the edge of his vision. Not an animal, not the sway of a branch. Something tall, impossibly slender, moved between the obsidian trunks. It flowed, rather than walked, its form indistinct in the deep shadows. Kalen flattened himself behind the gnarled root of a giant tree, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The shape paused, its head tilting as if listening to a frequency he couldn't perceive. Then, as silently as it appeared, it was gone, leaving only the thrumming silence behind. He found shelter in a hollowed-out trunk, a space that felt ancient and sacred. The wood was smooth and cool, smelling of petrichor and strange spice. From this dark alcove, he watched the alien twilight descend. Twin moons, one pale silver and one a dusty rose, climbed the sky, casting complex, overlapping shadows across the forest floor. He activated the beacon. Its silent, repeating pulse was a desperate prayer sent into the void, a single note of hope in a symphony of the unknown. He could only wait. Dawn brought a clearer view. One of the beings stood in a sun-dappled clearing, its back to him. It was taller than he'd imagined, with limbs that bent at angles wrong for a human. Its skin was the color of wet slate and seemed to shimmer, catching the light like oil on water. It didn't seem to be foraging or hunting. Its long, three-fingered hands gently traced the patterns on the bark of a tree, its posture one of quiet reverence. It was a scholar, or a priest, not a predator. One passed his hollowed log. He held his breath, pressing himself into the curve of the wood until his muscles ached. He heard no footsteps, only a faint, melodic hum that seemed to vibrate in his bones. A scent, like cool ozone and blooming night flowers, washed over him. Through a crack in the wood, he saw a slender, slate-gray hand brush against the moss growing on his shelter. The being paused for a long moment, then continued its silent, flowing journey, utterly unaware of the frantic, terrified heart beating inches away. He watched them for days. They were tenders of the forest. They moved in slow processions, tracing the pulsing lines of light that ran like veins through the bark of the ancient trees. They didn't speak, but communicated through shifting patterns of bioluminescence on their skin, a silent, complex language of light. They were gardeners of a world-sized organism, and he, the intruder, had mistaken their sanctuary for a wilderness. His fear slowly dissolved, replaced by a profound and humbling sense of awe. The light that answered was not of this world. It was the harsh, sterile white of a rescue vessel's searchlight, slicing through the canopy. It pinned him in its glare, a ghost in the machine. As the winch lowered, he looked back. In the shadows, a tall, slate-skinned figure watched, its own lights pulsing softly, a question asked in a language of color. Kalen felt a pang of loss for the silence he was about to leave, for the quiet, chromatic world he had only just begun to read. He was saved, but he was being exiled from Eden.